Welcome listeners near and far to the Pima County Democracy Podcast Series, and thank you for joining us. We are stronger together. This podcast series is paid for by the Pima County Democratic Party with Eric Robbins, Chair, and Brian Bickle, Treasurer, and is not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee. Thanks again for joining us. Let's get started with today's episode.
Welcome back to another episode of the Pima Dems podcast. If you can't tell from the annoying grating voice that you're hearing once more, you're stuck with me. It's Alex Kack filling in for Chairman Robbins and all of our other hosts that you guys seem to prefer more than myself. We are joined today by two amazing workers who are with the American Federation of Musicians, Local 33, and they're going to tell me a little bit about some of the organizing that they're doing right here in Tucson. Michael and Sarah, thanks for coming in, guys. How are you doing?
Great. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. So
I'm just going to take a guess that you are both musicians by trade.
Yes.
Exactly.
So what do you each respectively play, and how did you pursue that as a career and line of work?
So Michael is gesturing at me to start first, so I will do that. So yes, my name is Sarah Bromberg. I am a violist in the Tucson Symphony. I've been living in Tucson for about 10 years now. I am not really quite sure what possessed me to take up viola when I was in fourth grade, but who knows why fourth graders do what they do. I became quite captivated by it by the time later middle school and high school rolled around, and I just knew that there was nothing else that I really wanted to be doing with my life, much to the chagrin of my parents, who are not musicians. I'm sorry, Mom and Dad, but it turned out really well. So eventually I ended up going to conservatory at Oberlin and then at the Cleveland Institute of Music. And then from there, I decided Ohio winters were too cold for me, and that's how I ended up here in Tucson. What about you, Mike?
I play trombone, and I've been in the Tucson Symphony for now 24 years. Before that, I've been around. I played in the Honolulu Symphony before that, which is now the Hawaii Symphony, which you could do a whole podcast on that kind of stuff. And I grew up in Chicago. And believe it or not, I actually started on viola. But that didn't stick, and I play a little piano too. But once I picked up the trombone, it just seemed to be I became enthralled, and it just stuck, like Sarah was saying with the viola. It just seemed like that's what I had to do. And so probably from the age of 13 on, I knew I wanted to be a professional musician.
Fantastic. And strings and horns. So honestly, those are my two favorite categories of instruments. So, a thing that I've found is that a lot of people who aren't musicians themselves, even many musicians, are unaware that there is a union, that there's a labor union for musicians. Could you just tell us a little bit about the American Federation of Musicians? I mean, who's eligible to join? How could people go about organizing their workplaces? Maybe its history even. Well,
there was a time, if you go back far enough with orchestras, and these are legendary stories. Since I grew up in Chicago, I heard about the famous Fritz Reiner. He conducted the Chicago Symphony in the 50s, and the conductor these conductors had so much power. Like if they didn't like the way you played it someday at a rehearsal, they could fire you on the spot. So I don't know if I can't say with certainty that there's a connection, but it just seems like with orchestras, there were a lot of workplace conditions that weren't favorable to the musicians all the time. And so there is a national union for orchestras, the American Federation of Musicians. The headquarters is in New York. And orchestras, most orchestras in North America are represented by the AFM, including the Tucson Symphony.
So, and I wanted to dig in a little bit and ask about that. So the Tucson Symphony is currently organized, and if I'm not mistaken, they have a collective bargaining agreement that's been signed, and it's enshrined, and it protects the workers.
Correct.
But there are other symphonies and orchestras operating in town and in state. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, the Tucson Symphony is the only full-time professional orchestra the subject of today we're going to talk about is True Concord Voices and Orchestra. Started as a chamber choir 20 plus years ago and has now grown, and their name is True Concord Voices and Orchestra. It is professional because we get paid. So, and we can dig into that a little more.
Yeah, so what's kind of the situation with True Concord right now? Are the workers organized, or are they trying to be?
That's a really good question. I don't know. So we have organized, and we've hit a lot of hiccups along the way. And so I think that's going to be the subject of much of what we talk about today. So essentially, just to give our listeners a primer on what happens when workers anywhere in any field decide to organize, what happens is the workers talk to each other, basically. And then from there, the workers sign cards that say, yes, I want to be represented by this union. In our case, that's the AFM. From there, once there's been, I believe the threshold is 30%, but most unions aim for a greater proportion of yes signers than that. They approach the management of their workplace and say, hey, will you voluntarily recognize our union so that we can collectively bargain a contract? And as you might imagine, most employers will say a hard no. That was basically what happened to us. And so when that happens, we have this whole organization called the National Labor Relations Board that either the workers or the employers can file with in order to get a union election. Now, there's a lot to discuss regarding the NLRB because we filed for our election a year and a half ago. So it's been quite a journey.
So, take us on some of the steps of that journey. You filed for that election a year and a half ago. Has
Yes.
it happened yet?
The election, nope, hasn't happened. We went to hearing, and it works pretty similarly to your standard court hearing. Generally, both parties have counsel present. There are exhibits, so it works really quite a bit like a court hearing. And then from there, the NLRB employee decides, yes, the NLRB has jurisdiction and these people get to have a union election, or no, they do not. And there's so much that we can say about the NLRB. The first thing I want to say before I get into anything else there is that the NLRB is in a really tough spot. As I understand it, there's been a hiring freeze, so they can't hire new people, but they've lost a ton. The government shutdown hurt, obviously. And so there's this major backlog that is just so hard to get over. And we're just stuck. You know, we're hoping that we get our ruling soon to say that, yes, we can have our union election and go from there. But in the meantime, our employer is free to voluntarily recognize us and to say, yes, we will bargain with you. And so that's kind of the hiccup, the long and short of it that we've been dealing with for a year and a half now.
And that would have been my next question is a year and a half really feels kind of like heel dragging. There's been no voluntary recognition.
Nope. None at all.
No. Yeah.
I mean, that's deeply frustrating to hear. And frankly, my heart is out to you guys and all the workers at True Concord. What's it been like as a process so far internally? I mean, how did it go about in terms of organizing the workers at True Concord themselves? And what are you seeing in terms of your interactions with management?
Well, we should just be clear first that when you say True Concord, we're talking about the True Concord musicians, the orchestral musicians being represented to True Concord. So I just would like to just start by saying True Concord is 20 plus years old. I don't know. I think it might be 24 or 25 years old. It started off as Tucson chamber artists and they were just chamber choir, and now they've really grown. It's a highly artistic group. It's a very good group. The singers are top notch. And then they've changed the name to True Concord Voices and Orchestra. So the orchestra is definitely an integral part of the organization now. And that's why we felt that it was important and necessary to have this campaign. Because the Tucson Symphony has been around was going to be coming up on their 100th anniversary. And one of the reasons the Tucson Symphony is a solid organization as far as the musicians and the stability of it is in large part because of a union. When you have a union contract, you have certain expectations, you have stability, you have consistency. Players and management know what to expect, and it's like a constitution, you just accept it. And it also gives the musicians, the right to every few years when the contract is up to negotiate for things that they may need to change. It could be pay, it could be work conditions. It's usually all of that. And there are certain things that are happening in True Concord that are not consistent with, national standards with regard to the musicians, regarding pay, some work conditions, and especially, when it comes to recording.
Yes.
Because True Concord records, the concerts that they do for promotional purposes for their subscribers. And it's standard practice for union musicians, to get paid, to be compensated for recordings, regardless of whether it's being sold for profit commercially, as like a CD or a streaming, or whether it's used for, their promotional purposes. That's just standard practice. Because we can talk about what kind of layers that adds to musicians when they're playing, and being recorded. So.
Yeah. Is that something you guys are free to go in a bit more detail about? Because that's something that non-musicians, or even, musicians who are not, professionally employed currently might not, fully kind of grasp. Mm-hmm. Why is that such a sticking point? Why is that so important? I think you also mentioned some working conditions and pay issues. Anything that you guys are free to share, I'm sure our listeners would like to know.
Well, I can talk a little bit about the recording and how it is for musicians. You can talk about some of the other conditions.
Sure.
If that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, so let's take, for example, if you were a professional athlete, and they use your name, you get paid. They don't just pay you once. Here's a check and we're going to use you. It's okay, Mr. Michael Jordan, if we just use your name forever and make profits from it, right? So obviously that's an extreme example, but it's standard if you're being recorded and there's no like a further like endorsements beyond what we get paid, but there's a standard practice for getting paid extra, in the union. It's called an integrated media agreement or the IMA. And, when you get recorded, you're expected to get paid for that, whether they're using it for whatever purpose they're using it for. If you're going to be recorded for an extended period of time, you're going to get compensated. Musicians in the TSO get compensated for the radio broadcasts that they put on KUAT, for example. So the reason that's important is because musicians don't just show up and play concerts. We work really hard at home to prepare for not just the concerts, but to keep our skills sharp. We practice a lot. We can't just pick up you can't just pick up your viola. I can't just pick up my trombone and play without practicing. And some of this music is challenging. And there's an added element to pressure when you have a microphone in front of you, that people who don't play may not realize. And so it's normal and it's expected to be compensated for that extra pressure. And not only that, but for using our skills to be recorded and to be used later for whatever purposes they need.
Right. Like if someone wants to use our recording in a film, there's a licensing fee that goes along with that. And under the current status quo, we wouldn't receive any compensation for that if someone did want to license our recording to be used in their film or other project. Yes, and exactly. To me, that's pretty troubling. I also want to just put out there, actors go on strike over residuals, and I'm not saying, we're, out in the streets right now, but it's a serious issue. And in other related industries, it's considered very much a settled practice that if you continue to profit over an artist's output, then that artist deserves compensation accordingly.
It strikes me as deeply unfair. And I think that's, this subject specifically, this idea of work that is done in a creative field and that is then distributed, and how much the creators and workers involved do or don't benefit from that. I think we've seen some high profile examples, and we've seen public backlash over the last 10 years. I mean, you mentioned athletes. I don't think that's an extreme example. I think that's a pretty direct connection, honestly. I think back about there was with kind of the surge of comic book movies a couple years back, there was all these stories that came out about the artists, illustrators, writers that worked for these big companies who never got any residuals or payment for the use of those creations for decades. Many of they were saying were destitute, having health problems, and we saw massive backlash in the public. We saw industry standards change in so many of these different fields. Why do you guys think that this is still a sticking point here?
Well, one thing I do maybe want to put out there is that obviously True Concord is not the juggernaut that Marvel movies might be. So the structure there is a little bit different, and we're very sensitive to that. Still, my feeling is that if we don't have an agreement in place and someone decides to use our recording in, I don't know, any kind of movie or TV show or documentary or whatever it is, there are standard industry practices that we expect as professionals, and we don't feel that's controversial. And I would also like to add that some of our recordings are Grammy nominated. So this is a big deal to us.
It's true. I mean, I've done lots of recording with other orchestras in my career, and I will get this check from the AFM in the mail once a year or a couple of years. And I don't even know why or what it was for, but I do know, I know that the union is protecting me. The recordings that I've done were with union orchestras. So when I get these checks, it must be from what Sarah's talking about. They're using that music in something else. And that's where you do get the benefit. So it's really a protection too. Is recording kind of where the key, maybe desire amongst the workers was, to get organized and to try to seek the ability to collectively bargain? I know there were other issues you mentioned. Did you want to discuss those, or? Sure.
I would say recording was just one issue of several hot button topics that kept resurfacing. I don't know if I want to speak to all of the issues that came up, but one that I do feel comfortable sharing is workplace safety. I think I looked this up the other day. Mike, how many decibels can a trombone get up to? It's like definitely over 100. And I think 85 is the threshold at which it can start to become dangerous for human ears. And for those listeners who might not go to the symphony that often, in the back of the viola section, not infrequently, our ears are like right up against a trombone or a French horn or, what have you. These louder instruments that are so powerful. And standard industry practice is to make sure that we have these plexiglass sound shields behind us in order to protect our hearing, to provide earplugs in case it's really, really bad. I don't love playing with earplugs, but hearing loss is permanent. And so that's a really big deal to me personally.
No, I mean, I think workplace safety really should be always at the top of any employer-employee relationship.
And just to make it clear, I don't know that True Concord owns the plexiglass sound shields. I don't think they do.
You could provide your ear protection.
Exactly. Yeah. So a collective bargaining agreement covers a lot more than just, how much you're getting paid. It's all this other stuff that helps keep us safe and protected and able to show up and do our best job out there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mike, please.
I was just going to say that. I mean, they're not trying to intentionally hurt their ears. It's just they don't think of these things. And if you had the ability to just come together and bargain, there are things that musicians know that management may not know, and it's just a way of communicating with each other and getting protections and feeling safe.
That's actually exactly what I was going to say, is the thing that every time that we highlight a story like this, or we are working with one of our union partners and we find similar stories about contract negotiations where there isn't voluntary recognition or things are delayed. What strikes me from my own experience being in unions is how much getting a CBA in place often winds up benefiting the company or organization. It often benefits management because there is now this open channel to communicate and discuss these things that often only the workers really know about or are experiencing.
Yes, and it benefits them also in a different way. It benefits them in the long run. The organization will benefit, like I was saying about the Tucson Symphony being its 100th year now. True Concord management and leadership, whether it's in management or artistic, is going to change eventually. Everybody changes. I mean, we're here and we're gone, but the True Concord may live on. And when you have that stability, it offers stability for to protect the longevity of the organization too. I would think it would be in their interest to want to have this kind of stability.
Oh, absolutely. I can't see a drawback personally. And granted, I guess I'm not in management there, but I am here. And,
right.
And,
and that probably would be a good lead in to talk about some of the myths about around unionizing.
I would actually very much like you guys to delve into that, and specifically as it relates to your industry, because I think we've got these broad myths that we see percolate and permeate throughout the broader work culture of this country, but there's always these specific ones we see in industries too, these ways that they drill down, and I'd be curious to hear what that is.
Sure. Well, Alex, I'd be curious to hear what your favorite/least favorite anti-union myth would be. But for my part, I can just say that one of the actually, I don't know, it's hard to get started. I think maybe one of the more broad myths about unions is that they protect lazy people, they're for lazy workers, and that, unions are for losers. And once you have a union in place, you can't fire anybody. And to that, I would say, no, I've definitely seen people get fired under a union contract. And the point is that we have a conversation about what constitutes a fireable offense and what steps have to be taken in order to fire that person if it really is at that level. The point is that we have the conversation and that we can agree on it so that we have a written document with rules that everybody can abide by and everybody can understand.
Yeah, for sure. And it's hard to know exactly why they're resistant to the union. Maybe some of these myths, maybe they're just afraid of a large group of musicians organizing because they think we're going to maybe strong arm them into something. And so maybe that's one of the myths, that musicians are maybe corrupt and they like to strong arm things and put them in a vulnerable position, maybe financially or something. None of that is true. I mean, every organization, no matter what it is filled with people. Somewhere is going to have problems, right? But I think if they were just willing to listen to what this would be all about, I think it would alleviate a lot of fears.
We would never want to bargain our way out of a job.
Yeah,
that's just not a thing.
Not in our interest to do that.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing that so often gets missed. And you asked what my least favorite anti-worker kind of myth or talking point is, and I think if I had to pick one, it's that idea of, well, the union's not really going to do anything for you. We treat you well, we're family, so they're just going to take some of your money out of each check, really, to make those fat cats rich, which is kind of comical on its face. Mm-hmm. But I do think that actually, while that's maybe my least favorite or favorite just because it does sound so kind of preposterous, I think that we've been touching on one almost through this whole conversation, which is this idea that, having a union, having a CBA is going to hurt the organization or the employer itself directly. And that is just simply a myth. I've not seen nor even really heard of any employer that has been genuinely negatively impacted by having their workforce organized outside of things that, frankly, maybe their consumers, maybe the members of their community wouldn't want them to be doing anyways. And I think that's a much bigger question that, frankly, has very little to do with organized labor and the presence of a union in the workplace, and more to do with decisions that management makes in those companies.
Yeah.
We see this in so many different industries, how unions often lead to better outcomes. For example, I believe there was a California study done that showed that when a hospital has a nurses union in place, the mortality rate is lower. I don't know if anyone listening to this could honestly say that a better air traffic controllers union wouldn't keep us safer. Unions keep us safer. Teachers unions too. Smaller class sizes are safer. They're better for the teachers. These issues are all around us, and I think it is to our benefit as a society to improve labor conditions and to promote labor peace at work, no matter where it is.
Definitely. I mean, obviously our lives are not at stake in an orchestra, but the purpose of an orchestra is to keep growing and being artistically solvent and better all the time. And musicians want to play in a group where they feel like they're treated well. And if they don't, they may leave, and then that can hurt the artistic product. So there's another way. It's definitely beneficial to them because they want that artistic product to be good too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I'd have to imagine that it's, especially now, like so many things, it's probably a competitive employment marketplace. When you're trying to get and retain best talent in your area or even from out of your immediate area, you'd want that competitive edge of having a union, I would assume.
Yeah.
How was the process of organizing musicians kind of the same as organizing workers in any other industry? And how is it unique to that field?
I think one thing that's unique in our field is that in orchestras, we expect unionization. It's just kind of in the air we breathe. I think the very first time I heard about the AFM, I must have been about, 15 or 16 years old. And I was at a summer camp, and this, crotchety old viola said, yeah, you're going to have to join the AFM. It's just what you have to do. So you can see the job postings. They'll take a lot of your money, but you have to do it. I have different feelings now, but, the awareness of the union has been with me for a very long time now. And so when I went around trying to get, collect signatures for the union cards, I found that it was actually quite easy to do. Most people did not need much convincing because they already understand what a union contract can do for us. And so I think that might be a little bit different from other fields where maybe they're not working like 5 million different gigs, and they don't necessarily have the same union awareness that we already do in this field.
I think one of the other myths amongst musicians maybe is that, or they try to, maybe some of the people who are resistant to unions will tell you the union is going to make you join the union. Now, of course, this is a right to work state. And they say right to work states, can't make you join the union. Nobody can make you join the union, but as of course we would want everybody to join the union in the orchestra, but the union will still bargain for everybody. So people who are not in the union are still benefiting from the union. And I would also add that True Concord is benefiting from the union because the Tucson Symphony Orchestra is a strong artistic organization, in large part because of the union, because we've been a union for a very long time. And the union, all the things that we're talking about, is helping to attract better players to this area, and they're members of the Tucson Symphony. Same as from Cleveland or
from Virginia, but yeah, I went to school in Ohio.
Right. I'm from Chicago. We get a pool of players from our national auditions from all over the country and all over the world too. So, that's what makes it a very high artistic, organization. And these groups that are local feed off that. And part of that is the union.
Yep. So, absolutely.
Yeah.
One thing I'm a bit interested to maybe hear your thoughts on. We spoke about the NLRB earlier, some of the struggles, like just conditional struggles that the NLRB itself is having right now. In my mind, that's a political context. It's the political reality of our nation right now. But it's not necessarily the only one that you guys are existing in this moment. There is kind of this national governmental framework as directly impacted. We're also seeing resurgence of the labor movement in this country. We're seeing opinions change in many parts of the country about organized labor. And I think even here locally, we just had city elections. Labor was talked about quite a bit in that. We just had a congressional special election. Labor was talked about a lot in that. And I don't think I can open, a social media app or go too far from my house without hearing about, some local business where we're seeing labor organization happen. We're seeing workers talk to each other and get organized. Often, I think, in environments or in workplaces that much of the public doesn't necessarily consider a labor union being in. I think there was obviously quite a big fight about prep and pastry some years ago and kind of restaurants that were organizing. We've seen the Loft recently. These things that are very central to kind of the heart of our community that's also a political context. How do you view yourselves in your current push to be recognized and to bargain for the workers at True Concord? How do you see it fitting into all these different contexts and realities?
That is a juicy question. I think I need to take a minute to think about that.
Like you said, I think there's been a trend since the 80s. Unionization membership has declined since the 80s. That's probably a whole different subject you could have a podcast about. For various reasons, labor laws have changed, right to work states, that kind of thing. Management's putting out these scary myths to the workers, that kind of whatever has contributed to the decline in membership. There's a reason for it. And I think people are starting to maybe recognize that it's important for, as we struggle to make musicians are not rich. So, and people who are working, say, in Starbucks or wherever they see the importance of coming together and makes that solidarity to protect themselves.
One of the sadder things I see maybe online and even in real life too is when people say, well, Starbucks baristas, they don't deserve a living wage for doing this menial, silly little task. And I really disagree with that. And so I'm so inspired when I drive by the Starbucks near my house and I see those baristas on strike. I'm so heartened to see them out there doing what they do to get what is fair for them. These people, Starbucks baristas, grocery store workers, just, the entire working class, they deserve to have a living wage. I really believe that wholeheartedly. And I think the idea that if the task is either menial or if it's not really necessary for survival, like in the case of an artist or a musician, that a living wage is not deserved in those cases, I really take umbrage with that, and I don't agree because, in the case of these, maybe a Starbucks barista, not everyone goes to college and then goes and gets a white collar job. Those people should still be able to live dignified lives. And just because someone has chosen art doesn't mean that they should have to live in the margins of society either. And so I really feel that there's a lot of solidarity building, and it's a great thing to see.
As we're kind of winding down towards the end of our, I'd like to just hear from each of you. What is one thing that people that are listening to this program, people that are out in the community, can do to support you and your fellow musicians? And what is one thing that you would really like to leave those listeners with as a takeaway?
Mike, do you want to go first?
Well, when we have been present at the concerts, before the concerts, talking to patrons and giving them information. And there are places they can go to voice their support for the musicians too. So, and Sarah's been more involved in that than I have. So maybe you can talk about that.
Sure. So on social media, you can find us at True Concord Orchestra on Instagram, or if you just go onto Facebook and type in True Concord Orchestra, that's where we'll be. You can also catch more of our story on local33afm.org. There's a lot of different steps that you can take to support us. So for instance, you could sign our petition. That's going to be linked in our True Concord Orchestra bio. I believe there is still an active link up where you can actually email the True Concord Board of Directors themselves. And just, giving us a follow on social media will help us reach you better so that as we unfold more and more of this campaign and we take further steps to get that voluntary recognition, you can come and be a part of it.
I would like to add one thing that we didn't talk about. If you were to go to our website and support us, that'd be great. If you were to hear from True Concord themselves about this unionizing effort, you might hear some things that I would say are incorrect. True Concord is voices and orchestra. So the voices, there's a choral unit, and they put in some of the program books a little flyer to the patrons at the concerts explaining that there's this move to unionize the orchestra. And one of the things that they're saying is that some of the musicians want to unionize, which is incorrect. It's not some of the musicians. It's a majority of the musicians.
At least 75%.
Right. And they're trying to also imply that there could be a disruption in the continuities, perhaps, between the musicians and the chorus, because we're not involving the chorus in the union process. The choruses are not in musicians' union. They have their own union. So for them to try to equate the two, or make a confluence of the chorus and the musicians is just not correct. I don't know if they're doing that, if they just don't know or what. But in any case, people should know that many of the chorus members are actually supportive of the musicians in this process, and they're always a separate union for singers.
I think the one thing I would want to leave audiences with is that we in the orchestra, both in the symphony and at True Concord and wherever else we're playing, we love our audiences. So please come say hi to us. We love that you support what we do. We wouldn't be able to do what we do without you. So thank you for listening. And
absolutely.
Yeah. Please give us a follow.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you both so much for coming in. This has been the Pima Dems podcast. We got to sit down with American Federations of Musicians Local 33 members Mike and Sarah, and we will see you guys next time.